So I think what this study does is it adds to the evidence that there is likely a strong association between football and CTE. It doesn't provide a causal link, and that is something we're investigating in the future, but it does provide more evidence that there's a strong association.
One of the criticisms of this report is that it suffers from selection bias in that the brains were donated, not randomly selected, and people who suspect that they had CTE are more likely to donate the brains. What's your response to that criticism?
So we absolutely agree that there's selection bias. We point that out in our paper. The study wasn't designed to be a study of prevalence because of this issue with selection bias. The goal was to provide a comprehensive description of cases of CTE, including what we saw neuropathologically, how much exposure to football they had, and what clinical symptoms they demonstrated.
Of all the brains you studied, what was the prevalence of CTE?
87%.
Of the overall brains, but of
Correct.
the NFL players, it was 99%. Yet there was one brain that didn't show signs of CTE. How do you explain that? Is there a genetic component that could perhaps make someone immune to the disease?
So we don't know that for sure. There are folks who have a lot of exposure to football who probably are at low risk for this disease, and conversely, there's probably people who require relatively low levels of exposure and are still at high risk of this disease.
What do we know about CTE at this point?
We tend to see two clinical presentations. One is a mood and behavior presentation, so symptoms like depression, having a short fuse, aggression, explosivity. And we also see more of a cognitive presentation, so issues with thinking, executive function, problem solving, and memory. In both cases, the disease seems to progress, and in those with cognitive symptoms, they progress to also have mood and behavior symptoms, and those with mood and behavior, they tend to also progress to have cognitive symptoms, and then late in the course, dementia often develops.
Are people more likely to get CTE if they start playing football at a younger age?
We've been a part of several studies that have looked at age of first exposure to football and risk of clinical symptoms. And we do see a relationship there. Those studies weren't in our brain bank, and those cases haven't passed away and weren't examined for CTE. So we don't know whether those increased symptoms were CTE related or related to another etiology.
So there's no definitive answer at this point, but it seems to be a risk if you do start earlier, right?
Well, so whether starting young, when you start younger, you also play more football. So is it that you're playing more football, or is it that the brain is at a key developmental point and becomes more susceptible because it's still in development? These are questions that we're actively investigating.
Last year, 3 million Americans between the ages of 6 and 18 played American football. What would you say to their parents?
I think as researchers, our goal is to learn as much as we can about this disease and disseminate that information to parents or to professionals, and then let them make informed decisions. I think what parents should know right now is that there seems to be this strong link between football and risk of CTE. We don't know what the strength of that relationship is. So it's difficult to make judgments, but I think an overabundance of caution is worthwhile and important.
I don't know if you have kids, but would you let them play football?
So I do have young kids, and I would not let them play football until we understand this relationship between the amount of exposure and risk of disease better. I think the fact that we did see this disease among a few high school players suggests that there are some people who are more susceptible to hits and risk of this disease. So until we can make that differentiation and understand that relationship better, I would not go in that direction.